Hello and welcome again to Florida Internet and Television's FiTV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you just a few blocks from Florida's capital. Today, we are with the pundits, the leaders in Florida digital news. I am once again joined by Brian Burgess, publisher and editor-in-chief of The Capitalist, Matt Dixon, senior reporter with Politico Florida, and Trimmel Gomes, founder of the Rotunda podcast. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Okay, so we're jumping in. We're going to do a recap of the session, then we're going to run through the elections. I mean, what more fun could we have on a Tuesday morning here in Tallahassee? So, does anyone want to go ahead and take a shot across the bow at a certain person who decided to sleep in and wear his PJs today?
I just think it's very interesting every time Peter Schorsch is in Tallahassee that he can't get up early in the morning. I'm not saying, you know, that there's a relationship between him being in Tallahassee and Adams Street bars and him not being able to get up early.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Trimmel, anything?
I'm giving him some credit. He released a magazine today, so Influence magazine, the next edition. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fancy.
Help him out.
It's fancy.
Infinitely nicer than I am.
And we'll all be called upon later to help promote it, I'm sure. So.
Yes. Later. I got my email actually before the cancellation of him being able to come. Okay. All right. Well, with that, any other shots at Mr. Schorsch are welcomed, according to Mr. Dixon. Okay. So let's move on. So session. How'd it turn out? What are we looking at? Any missed opportunities? What was a surprise? Burge, let's start with you at the Capitol.
Well, I hate to steal Politico's thunder, Matt, but the whole session started off with a story that you guys broke in, what was it, December? The whole sexual harassment thing, and that sort of was the dominating narrative at the beginning. But things all changed, and all the priorities, of course, I mean, to say the obvious, guns became the issue. And I think a lot of things sort of got missed or swept under the rug. A lot of things didn't happen because of that, and that narrative completely changed. I think the perception was it was a political necessity to deal with those things. And now that we're even seeing some sort of fallout or reversals. We got Randy Fine now talking about now he's going to file bills to reverse some of the things they just did. So to not mention guns, sorry to take the easy one, but that dominated everything.
Well, Trimmel, let's go to Mr. Dixon here and talk a little bit about the lead-in. I mean, you know, Politico was kind of on the top shelf, if you will.
In the beginning, that was, like Brian said, the dominant narrative, but things changed, and rightfully so. And I think the most striking thing of this session is it's the economy, the budget, everything in Florida has recently been driven by tragedy. Mm-hmm. Going into this session, two words could describe the budget process: opioids and hurricanes, opioids and Irma. And when the Parkland tragedy happened, the whole trajectory of session, everything changed. And there were people in the Keys who I'm sure saying, you know, please don't forget us as everyone sort of shifted focus. But this year's budget is dominated by tragedy. Bigger tragedies edged out other tragedies for money, and it was sort of this very sad horse race towards the end of what can we fund to make sure we get a gun and school safety bill out, which is $400 million, and what can we do to still make sure that we're hardening our state for future Irmas. And I think that, you know, very sort of dire dynamic was, you know, the undercurrent of what lawmakers were doing this year.
Yeah, Trimmel, how about from your vantage point?
It's the same thing that they just mentioned, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that issue. Because when guns came into play, that took and sucked all the air out of the room. And then when you even look at what we're dealing with now with DACA on the national level, we dealt with immigration with Speaker Corcoran and that issue that was really picking up traction, and it just petered out, and so many other issues like that just like really fell by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like every other either attempt or coalition that got together to talk about maybe a more traditional issue, I mean, they couldn't get above 6 feet underwater. You know?
Every year lawmakers have one job. The only thing they have to do is pass the budget. This year that was different. They had to pass a gun and school safety bill. It just, the political dynamics and everything associated with that wouldn't allow for otherwise. So that's really, you know, what took up the air in the room.
Right. So despite all that, right, so session ends on a Sunday. Very, very anticlimactic. I mean, it was the jeans and flip-flops end to session, frankly, because, you know, it was going into spring break, and you just kind of had that vibe of let's get out of here, let's pass the budget and go. I mean, what did you guys see, you know, the last 3 days? Was there anything that slipped by?
It was just needing to be get over with. And something that many people say each time that I hear is, why don't they do this stuff earlier in the process, so we're not in this crunch time that we always find ourselves in towards the end. And we know there are many reasons as to why they take their time with all the pomp and circumstance and ceremony. But it just faded out into the weekend, and those who were in the know, like us, were there. But the public were like, oh, like you know, they didn't even know what was going on. Some of them.
Parting shots.
I'd say I got a parting shot. I'd say that if there's anything that slipped by, it's Richard Corcoran's opportunity to look like he's in control and in command of the situation. He certainly wanted to go into session being proactive and not reactive, and that's not how it ended up. And it's not necessarily his fault, but that's not the ideal narrative that he wanted to have scripted out. Wasn't the fairy tale ending for him.
Right. Politico?
To your point, I don't think that was all. I think some of that was by design. I mean, he didn't want to be the face of the gun issue, and so he sort of handed up. Jose Oliva, the next speaker coming in, was really the face of that issue and negotiations for the House, and I don't think that was, you know, an accidental slip-up by any means.
Well, let's talk. He didn't escape criticism for the gun issue at all.
I mean, there's a reason that the legislature's avoided, you know, sort of gun reform or the whole gun conversation for a long time, is because, you know, no matter where you're at on it, there's a way for the political mud to kind of stick to you, and I don't think Speaker Corcoran will escape that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the ascendancy of the next leaders. You got Senator Galvano, who's going to be the president, and then you had Representative Oliva, who's going to be the speaker. I mean, how did we see it? Because traditionally, in a second session, that last week or those last 2 weeks is that rise. Did this session really give those two the platform to take that mantle?
Yeah, I mean, those were the two who were leading the negotiations on the school safety bill for the respective chambers. Mm-hmm. They're the ones, I don't know if this gaming special session that has popped up is going to happen or not, but if it does, those two will be on the forefront there. So yeah, I think the president and the speaker have sort of ceded control of a lot of some of the big issues and negotiations to the next in line.
Okay.
I noticed that too. They were in the forefront or put in place to be there, present at the signing of the school safety bill and so on and so forth. So I saw the transition sort of taking place.
Yeah.
Right. Undoubtedly, those guys got the credit from a lot of the folks, the insiders in this town recognize that the power has shifted. But it's gonna feel like those guys aren't kind of assuming the mantle quite the same way as some of the last few years, just because we've now got a huge election cycle that's sucking the oxygen out of the room. We have the big issues, the big narratives that sort of superseded that. So it might feel like they didn't come in with the same sort of, I guess, force or authority, but they're there and they're definitely have asserted themselves.
All right, so let's shift away. So session's over. We're now in full-blown campaign mode. I mean, you've got fundraisers, you got people announcing, paperwork's getting filed. Let's turn to the biggest race in Florida. It's going to be the Senate race. Is Governor Scott positioned to not only run but win the U.S. Senate if he declares?
Speaking from experience. Yeah, of course.
Right.
I mean,
right. Might be a little biased down there, but go ahead and give us
it doesn't matter whether biased or not. Rick Scott is going to be prepared. He's not going into the 2018 Senate race if he's going to run, and I think we all assume he is. Mm-hmm. He's going to be prepared, and I shouldn't even say going to be. He is prepared, knowing him, knowing how he operates, knowing his mentality and the people around him. He has been prepared. He has been positioning. So how is he positioned? He's very well positioned, I think. Right. Is he going to win? I don't know. It's a very tough race for him. But Bill Nelson's never faced anything like what he's about to face with Rick Scott.
Yeah.
What we've seen is the preparation as in play. He's been preparing for this. It's been trickling out over time, and there were some missteps when you talk about oil drilling, and we're seeing how that is being played out, like who did what when, with the secretary coming down and declaring that Florida is off the list of considerations. We're seeing there was an attempt to be close on the national issues with the president, and we'll see how that plays out. So we've been seeing him showing some steps toward keeping in this national spotlight.
How's Politico's handicap on this race?
I mean, I have no idea. To Brian's point, it's going to be very tough. Governor Scott's the best political animal the state has from a fundraising perspective, from being able to hit every media market in his private plane to a laser-like focus on his talking points. He's gone from sort of a political outsider to one of the best politicians Florida has, but at the same time, Bill Nelson's a sort of a folksy Democrat who speaks the language of North Florida, and he has had weak opponents, but he's also won statewide races here, and he's the only Democrat who's been able to do that. So I don't know who's going to win that race, but I think Governor Scott is certainly a formidable challenge, and Bill Nelson was, running against the likes of Connie Mack, and there's no Hooters bar fights from Governor Scott's record. So you're going to have to dig a lot deeper.
That we know of.
Yeah,
that we know of.
You're going
They were all quietly hushed up.
Yeah, you're going to have to dig a lot deeper with Governor Scott than just go into some Jacksonville police reports.
All right.
Rick, let me say this. Rick Scott is one of the few guys that can run against Bill Nelson after having been in office for 8 years, and he can run as a non-politician still to this day, because he's running against Bill Nelson, who's been in office for 40 years. So by contrast, it works. I don't think it works in many other venues or against many other opponents, but he can probably play that I'm not a politician card again, and it'll work.
Or if you're tethered to logic as opposed to perception. I agree with your point, but it's still a.
But it's going to happen. Don't you think it's going to happen? I think that's what he's going to do.
I'm not disagreeing with your point. It's just that when you look at it, objectively, it's sort of a weird case to make, but your point's valid.
You're going to hear a lot, about 40 plus in office, guarantee it.
Nope,
right, so let's shift gears. Let's start with the governor's race, biggest race for Floridians, arguably. Where do things stand in the race, right to left? We'll start with you, Matt.
Circular firing squad mode. Both primaries, because there's a term-limited governor. Both primaries are very heated. Campaigns are starting to attack each other. Donald Trump's going to play a huge role in this. He's still very popular with Florida Republican primary voters, so the Republican candidates are trying to tether themselves to him, and Democrats are trying to ding him, and we'll see how that kind of coalesces and comes together in the general election. But right now, it's the early stages of circular firing squad mode in the primaries.
Yeah. Trimmel?
I'm from the outside looking in, from the people. Like, we're seeing that they're really not that paying attention to the governor's race. I think there was a poll or something done last week. So I'm more like, what's not resonating with the public?
I mean, it's early, right? I mean, would you guys categorize it as still being early? I mean, when do people engage typically on these races?
Even when
it's close.
Monday before election day, maybe.
Well, and even so, it's a midterm. There's no president. So, I mean, there's no president on the ballot. So midterm election turnout is notoriously, low. So I don't know that, a huge portion of the electorate ever fully engages.
Right. So DeSantis, Burgess, we'll throw this one to you. So DeSantis had a nice pop when he came out, kind of shook the establishment, even though Putnam was raising money. I mean, as somebody who's seen the messaging in that race, how do you look at the R's on that one?
I mean, I think that DeSantis has a long way to go. He can win the messaging fight, I think, against Putnam in this environment, only because, almost the same reason the argument that Rick Scott has against Bill Nelson, because Putnam had been in D.C. longer than DeSantis, even only by a small amount, but that matters to Republicans. But I think it's going to be a very hard message for him to get out, because it requires a lot of money, a lot of dollars, and it's hard to say right now if that fundraising pace is going to pick up. I don't think that Ron DeSantis has to raise at parity with Putnam to be competitive, but he's got to be close, and I'm not sure he's going to get there. If he raises $1 million a year, a month between now and election day, it's not going to happen. So we've got to see a major increase.
Okay, so we got a little bit of time left. Let's shift gears real quick. So on the D side, I mean, Levine, Graham, the mayor. How's that one looking? I mean, any leaders? I mean,
Philip Levine is sort of oddly doing a Rick Scott thing in the sense that he went on TV very, very early, and he's probably not going to fully come down until the primary. Nobody knew who he was, mayor of Miami Beach, and now all of a sudden he's kind of running neck and neck with Gwen Graham. So that matters in Florida, and I think it'll continue to.
Right. Okay. Last, 5-second quote. What should politicos be looking for in the next month or so on this race, or next couple of months? Trimmel.
Well, I'm looking to see, what on Gwen Graham and what she's been doing. I think I read this in Politico, that strategy of hitting Palm Beach hard with her efforts there. So I'm just watching that race in general, seeing who's going to percolate to the top with all this money flowing in.
All right, 10 seconds left.
I think it's money. I think what you look for is money. Just watch those dollars, because, and especially in those committees, who cares about the campaign accounts at this point? It's all about the independent committees.
Can Ron DeSantis beat the 5 blocks around the Capitol? Those are the guys who are supporting Adam Putnam. He has the home field advantage. Will he be able to raise enough national money to beat that?
Awesome. Well, great insights as always. I wonder why this one was the best one yet. I guess we can't handicap
wasn't missing
that.
anything, was it?
It wasn't
missing any influence.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Well, thanks guys for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your insights in the near future, and we'll stay tuned for your campaign updates and any legislative issues that come up as well. That's all the time we have for today's show of The Pundits. Thank you for tuning in. Before you go, though, make sure you hit us up on our Facebook and Twitter feeds. And for now, make sure you hit the internet, stream all the stuff you possibly can on your internet and television connection. Thanks for tuning in.